All right. Hey, cool. So this is being recorded. So I'm John. I work at Intel, and just a little bit of background for me. I got my Bachelor's of Science in Chemistry and Applied Mathematics at University of Oregon, and then after that, I got my Master's in Materials Science and Engineering at PSU. I've been working at Intel as an integration engineer for about 1 year and 5 months now. Um, but already in that kind of time span, I've already gotten a lot of stuff, a pretty good picture of what we do at Intel. So I mainly work at Intel in support of fab processes. Intel is a typical high volume manufacturing job, which requires an understanding of what something called SPC, which is called basically statistical process control. The main twist is that we're dealing with the manufacture of nanoscale devices. So extensive knowledge of chemistry, physics, and material science is needed to ensure quality of a product. Also, computer science also helps in terms of development of monitoring systems and data analysis. So per your request, Keanu, kind of a typical day in the life is comprised of two things. The primary function is the review of yield and quality critical features of our devices. So Intel, if you don't know, we're basically a chip company, but there's a lot of things that goes behind the scenes in terms of that. So we actually need to build from bare silicon um, nanoscale transistors, millions of them um, on a 300 millimeter wafer. And so in order to make sure that a majority of those devices work, we need to use SPC to track hundreds of inline parametrics to ensure that those parameters fall within a certain range of a normal distribution. This ensures that our chips are of a certain quality every time. The secondary role is fab support in the event that things kind of go amiss. This is kind of where an understanding of hard science comes into play. So say a certain process like wet etch or dry etch or lithography or chemical vapor deposition in line goes wrong. We need to understand why it went wrong, how that impacts adjacent processes, and how we can fix that issue to minimize what are called excursions or deviations from normal processing. So you really need to have a good handle on your stuff as well as robust model-based problem solving skills. So I figure in addition to kind of explaining the role, I can list a couple good technical and non-technical skills that you would need in this type of a role. So starting off technical skills, hard science background definitely wouldn't go amiss. We often need to troubleshoot more esoteric problem statements rooted in chemistry, material science, physics, etc. Data analysis and manipulation is also pretty important. We process thousands of wafers every single day with over 100 yield and quality critical parameters tracked. So making sure which data to pay attention to, which one we can kind of scrutinize a little less is critical, because if you try to look at everything all the time, then you would just be, on fire, basically on fire. Next would be what's called model-based problem solving. So we're working in a pretty abstract space, i.e. nanoscale devices. So the visualization of an issue is key to understanding its root cause. Data is king. So you can come to a meeting with the data, and for the most part, a portion of the participants will be convinced of what you're trying to say. But digesting it and making it to coherent narrative is the way to solve problems and thus get paid more, basically. So a couple non-technical skills. Um, Being a team player and networker is always something that you would need in any kind of job. I work on a team and I often have to share my work. While there are lone wolf roles in the org, there are not many, and oftentimes you need to be kind of the best to serve in those roles. Further, unless your team is just absolutely kick ass, you'll often you'll often be more or less on your own in a matter of months. So building relationships with the knowledgeable people in your organization or at your company is pretty important. The next thing is being proactive or being a go-getter. So academia is nice because it's full of people who are enthusiastic to share their knowledge. And while these people do exist in corporate situations, it's a lot less common. And unfortunately, it's a lot more cutthroat. You're basically competing for raises, and people know that, personal advantages are the key to job security. So realistically, while corporate cultures are kind of shifting to push team narratives, you are truly the only one responsible for your own success. Next thing is the last one is diplomacy. So in terms of my role in particular, I often have to deliver bad news to certain groups, like I was mentioning earlier, wet etch groups, dry etch groups, etc. Which usually means that I found in the data their tool was, doing something in a non, uh, what's called POR way, or process on record way. So that means that it's screwing up somewhere, and you know it's causing issues in line and not creating the product we are supposed to be. So you often have to get in a room with somebody and just tell them why their stuff is going bad. And you need to do it in a way that kind of aligns them to what you want them to do, because more often than not, they'll get defensive. And with a company like Intel, you have thousands of operations in line, and they could easily say, well, how do we know this isn't something else? Well, how do you know this is us? So not only do you need to have hard data, but you also need to be able to get people to align to basically your model. So that's pretty much kind of a high level summary of what I do, and kind of like things that I think would be crucial to a job role such as this. Are there any questions that I could maybe answer about kind of um, a nanoscale device company role, or if anybody's interested in that?
I don't have anything yet, but I'm trying to think of stuff.
Hmm.
I guess I'm curious on the teamwork side and the diplomacy piece. Did
Hmm.
you build those skills mostly, would you say, once you were on the job, or were there experiences you had as a student or in other work you did before you started at Intel that really helped you develop that?
So I'm gonna say that I'm kind of lucky, because I kind of naturally try to talk with people as much as I can. I like to ask a lot of questions. I asked when I was in school, I would ask professors, to explain things a little bit more deeply, and also just kind of like previous jobs. I worked at the newspaper at University of Oregon, so I was one of those people that was just basically handing out trash. So I had to be able to convince people to take the newspaper. Just kidding. The Emerald's a great publication. No disrespect. Um, but I would definitely say when I started the job, I kind of recognized, hey, this is a big plate of stuff that I'm taking on, and it would be foolhardy to kind of lone wolf it, because like I was saying, you need to have a good understanding of chemistry, statistics, physics, material science, and all that kind of stuff. There are a lot of people who enter Intel with just kind of like a generic science background. So I know a lot of biologists, food scientists, and everything. But the key feature between everybody that I see works there, they have a good sense of logical problem solving skills. They're good people. They're very friendly, open, and yeah, they one of the crucial things is they know how to convince people. So they're kind of persuasive. Do I think that you can develop persuasion as an ability? Yeah, most definitely, especially if your job depends on it. But definitely kind of pushing yourself to be more out there is definitely one of the things that I can kind of advocate while you're going through school. Like, for example, this meeting, like when Andrea reached out to me, I was like, oh man, I hate public speaking. But I figure but I figure, this is a good experience for me, because I can kind of work on networking with people and kind of explaining my role. And in explaining my role, I understand it better in my own brain. So, yeah, kind of a long-winded answer to a relatively simple question. So sorry, Andrea, but that's kind of my stance on it, I guess. Nice.
So let's say like there's a process that there's a problem in, and you don't understand like the science behind it. Where do you go to first? You go to like coworkers, Google, books,
Papers, actually. So papers
papers.
are a pretty good resource. I was pretty lucky in my graduate studies because we have a pretty robust semiconductor manufacturing course at PSU. So if anybody who's watching this is interested in doing that, is local to Oregon, then PSU is great, because there's a lot of Intel alumni there who are willing to just dump so much information on you, so much useful information on you. But in the event that I didn't know anybody that knew anything about the problem I was trying to face, which was rare, because we have 20-year veterans to the industry there, so everybody has seen something at least once before. In the event that is kind of, we encounter a new problem statement or a new issue, papers are a pretty reliable way of looking at things.
Okay.
Same vein though, papers are based on kind of limited lab experiments. Intel is nice because we're basically doing nanoscale experiments at one of the highest volumes we could possibly do. We have thousands of wafers going in line, and we have the ability to collect a lot of inline data. So if you think about it, Intel is just a giant lab. So if you wanted to learn something about material science or chemistry or physics, Intel's a great place to work.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was the other one? It was so let's say you used to understand it but you forgot it. How do you refresh your memory?
So the cool thing about Intel is that the stuff that you would need to know happens fairly regularly. There aren't very many times where like I would have to like brush up on something. Everything that you would need to readily speak to would already kind of be in your immediate wheelhouse. But in terms of brushing up on stuff, like I said, papers, textbooks, I entered Intel without any kind of coding background. And honestly, YouTube's a great source for that kind of stuff. So I immediately learned how to code there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So just being able to look for the knowledge you seek is also a great personal skill to have. Just like, I don't advocate this, but I know that a lot of schools use kind of like standardized testing, or like kind of they recycle test questions. And so the joke is kind of like the people who are able to dig up those questions and kind of regurgitate the answers. In a way, that's kind of like digging for data that you need. Once again, I don't advocate doing that because that's academic dishonesty, but definitely it reveals something that could come in handy later.
Wait, what part of that is this academic dishonesty?
Well, I mean, like say a test preparer that uses questions that are straight out of a textbook and they don't modify, the variables, and like the exact answer key is available online, and like a student finds that answer key and just regurgitates the answers out. Does that entail that student probably doesn't have a very good understanding of the actual test material? Maybe. Does that say that the student's able to find the information they need? I would say absolutely. So it's a
Oh.
double-edged sword. Yeah,
I see,
yeah,
I see what you're saying. Okay.
yeah. And once again, if we need to sanitize this recording to kind of reflect my stance of don't cheat, then feel free. But I feel like, if you want to creatively manipulate a bad situation to being a kind of a skill, then I think possibly that could be something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can I ask you how you decided that you wanted to go towards semiconductor and kind of when you made that decision and what kind of influenced you there?
So I moved to Oregon in around 2005. I live in Hillsboro, and so I live next to the Intel Ronler Acres campus. And so I just see a bunch of people walking around with like a blue badge, and I'm just like, oh, that's pretty interesting. I have no idea what they're doing, but it looks pretty interesting. It seems like a pretty knowledgeable group of people. And like all of my neighbors work at Intel, and usually when I would talk about something at school, when I was in high school, I was like talk about something there, and they would immediately know what I was talking about. I was like, oh, triple integrals, no problem. Like Lagrangians, no problem. I know all about that. It's like, wow, what a diverse group of people. And so when I figured out what they were doing at Intel, and I found out it was such an intersection of so many hard science things, chemistry, material science, physics, I thought, wow, if you really want to be a smart person and not kind of spend a lot of time in academia where you're just kind of going over, unfortunately, more limited data sets, like Intel is actually a pretty good place to be. So like I was saying earlier, a lot of data inline to analyze, a lot of state-of-the-art tools that you're working with. So in physics labs or chemistry labs, you're often dealing with kind of fourth or fifth generation equipment, depending on the funding quality of your university. Whereas at Intel, you're getting, premium stuff, and it's serviced by actual engineers rather than, hungover graduate students, which is, yeah, me too. That's kind of like an option if you really want to go into hard sciences. And like people who work at Intel for a long time often become professors elsewhere because, they've encountered literally everything you could probably want to study with respect to semiconductors in a practical field, and they've discussed it at length in 70-person meetings. So yeah, that kind of just appealed to me, and also I'm just kind of a naturally inquisitive person. So I like figuring things out. I like chemistry. I like physics. So I figured it would be a natural fit. And I live 5 minutes away from campus, so I could literally walk to work, which is nice. I don't like commuting.
Okay, so how did you like learn your data analysis skills? Were there courses, or did you self-teach processes?
So a lot of it. So there are two different facets of data analysis. There's bulk data analysis, and there's actually kind of like problem-solving data analysis. Through chemistry and through physics, you kind of get that that second taste. You actually kind of have to parse how systems interact with each other at several different scales. You have the what is it? You have the thermodynamic understanding, and then you have the mechanical understanding of a lot of different systems. So that's kind of baked into your hard science degree, understanding from a theoretical standpoint. In terms of data analysis, I was also an applied mathematician in my undergraduate. So I also got a little bit of that, more on the side of partial differential equations and not so much statistical analysis. But I feel like if you can understand, partial differential equations, statistics is pretty easy. Statistics kind of gets the reputation of being the quote easy math, and it really is. But there's a lot of ramifications as a function of understanding statistics, so it's not to be taken lightly. When I entered Intel, the main thing that I had to learn was about statistical process control, which basically takes a normal distribution of a population and just time pairs it, so puts it over time. So say, for example, you're working in a factory that makes beach balls, and you need to have those beach balls inflate to a radius of about 30 inches. And you find that if you have a beach ball that inflates to 28 inches, it doesn't have quote ideal beach ball characteristics. And
Mm-hmm.
if it inflates to a size of like 34 inches, then it again doesn't have ideal beach ball characteristics. And so what you would need to do is you need to take a look at all of the tools that make that beach ball and make sure that they're spitting out beach balls that fall within that particular range. Now, this is a grossly oversimplified example, but at Intel, it's virtually the same thing, except instead of beach balls, we're making computer chips. And instead of a single tool that makes a beach ball, we have literally thousands of operations, because we're making nanoscale devices.
Mm-hmm.
So an understanding of that kind of world is essential, but I feel like it's pretty easy to pick up.
Okay, so what's the difference between like a minor in applied math and then a minor in math?
So I look at it like there are two different types of maths that you can go to at university. You have applied, which is basically kind of in support of physics and things like that. So like I was saying, partial differential equations, linear algebra, stuff that goes into mechanical engineering or the other hard sciences. And then you have pure math, which is kind of like like sets of numbers, set theory, proofs, complex analysis. Well, actually, complex analysis is fairly applied. But in pure math, you're kind of like going over axioms and like really deep esoteric subjects that won't necessarily have applications in real life.
Mm-hmm.
And just going into a minor in math, I don't know if you're actually tasked to pick either applied or pure. It's just you need to satisfy a couple electives. So if you're taking a minor, I would recommend looking up courses that correspond to your applied mathematics, because you're probably going to use that more if you're in a math-centric field. But I mean, do whatever you want with your education. Pick what is interesting to you, because if you're interested in it, then it's not going to be difficult. Well,
Yeah.
hopefully it won't be difficult. Yeah.
So let me try and understand. So you said you got something in applied math. What was the prefix to that?
It's a major. It was a double major in applied mathematics.
Okay.
So I got it was a double major in chemistry and applied math.
Okay. So applied math wouldn't be a minor like that.
It could be a minor. I think. I don't know what entails a math minor. I think it's
Okay.
just less courses.
Okay.
But I think there's less specificity overall because it's just a minor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep.
I have another question,
Yo.
kind of maybe off the wall, but if
Yeah.
you weren't at Intel, where else would you go? Like
Ah.
who are the major competitors in that space, and where do people transfer to from Intel?
Well, there are really no competitors to Intel. We're the best. No, I'm just kidding. But honestly, so Samsung is a pretty big company. Another company called TSMC, which is mainly a fab versus development. But they do a lot of important work, and theoretically, my job would be one-to-one over there. Another big competitor, as probably we all know, is Apple because they're just expanding into so many different spaces. Um, I think Google, to some extent, is also trying to jump into that market, and it's looking pretty good, surprisingly. So you have a big plate of options in terms of if you want to get into semiconductor manufacturing. But I will say, just on the basis of historical precedence, Intel is one of the best because we have our founders were the semiconductor guys, and you will probably encounter the most knowledgeable people working at Intel because you have these 40-year veterans that knew Noyce and Grove and all of these other people who just know literally everything. And granted, Samsung and Apple and Google also probably have some very knowledgeable people just by the merit of their company name. But do I think Intel's kind of the leader in that space? Yeah, definitely.
What about the flip side of semi, which is solar? In my opinion, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you know any colleagues that came from that world or moved to that world?
Actually, not very many. So my time at Intel is pretty short. So I don't really know very many people who kind of move around in the industry. And I think it's more my generation, like the kind of the millennial generation that's kind of the leapfrogging between companies, spending 2 years at particular places. All the kind of senior people at Intel have been there for a long time and aren't necessarily coming in from other places. But I know that a couple of colleagues on my team have speculated about, I'm going to join Tesla after getting this many years of experience here, or I'm going to join Google or Apple or whatever and stuff. And so, not a whole lot of people talking about solar stuff, but I figure, in this type of role where hard science is so valued, it would not be a difficult transition to go there. And in my graduate research, we also kind of look at perovskites, which is, solar-based stuff. So I'm already got a toe in that, but my lab days are quickly falling behind me in favor of new and more exciting ventures. Yep. Good question.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's say 20, 30 years in the future, things
Yeah.
change, How do you keep up to date with all the new innovations?
The cool thing about keeping up with innovations is you don't really need to keep up because it's all happening in literally your backyard. So the next generation of semiconductor technology is being discussed literally a stone's throw away from my group. My group supports the fab, but we are directly adjacent to technology development. So um, a lot of Intel's future are kind of readily available to me and my group. So it's just a matter of getting in contact with the person who is kind of overseeing projects. In terms that, yeah, all you would need to do is talk with them or get them in a meeting or something to really understand what the next big thing is going to be. So that's a very nice thing. If you like to stay on the bleeding edge of a particular technology, in companies like Intel and Apple, Google, et cetera, pretty good places to be because they're already looking into the future. They seldom just focus on what's going on now. It's always we need to look a couple generations ahead. In fact, there are conferences out there that talk about the Silicon Roadmap, which is readily available to most people in the public space. And so, yeah, Intel is completely privy to that.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Yeah.
I don't think I have anything else, but if there was more questions from me might stem. But if there's not, I much appreciate the talk. It was very helpful, very
No problem.
informative.
Yeah.
Uh, in for your fear of public speaking, honestly, I think you were very smooth and
Yeah, that's the
coherent.
thing. Yeah, thank you. I tell my colleagues very often, like I have a terror, public speaking is probably one of my greatest fears. But I'm told by my colleagues, like when I'm actually executing, I don't, well, I don't vomit when I'm doing it. So that's probably the step one in that process. But usually, I completely black out when I'm given like a speech or something. So probably I'm gonna leave this phone call. I'm like, wow, 30 minutes have passed and I don't remember anything what I said. So
Yeah,
yeah,
But
very
you'll
in the
have a
moment.
thank
recording,
you.
so
I'll have a recording and I'll be like, oh no, like I said these things. No, yeah, it's
I mean,
yeah.
you
I
had
hope.
like a very good answer to all of our questions, so bravo.
Thank you. Yeah, I try. If anybody's interested in joining Intel in the future, I'd be happy to give a recommendation, pending a review of resume and all that. So, of course. But yeah, I'm always in support of getting people into this kind of a field because we always need more talent, always need more scientists, and the more educated a populace is, the better I believe it is.
Cool.
Cool.
awesome. Thanks again for joining us today and sharing your experiences.
No problem. Anytime. Tell your students good luck on their finals for me.
Will do.
All right.
See ya.
Thanks. Thanks.
No problem. All right. Take it easy, guys.